Before you watch anything else today, I need you to hear 5 words. I know it's probably going to be a very packed stadium. A world number 10. A Grand Slam finalist. A woman who has already beaten Iga Swiatek's biggest rivals and stood on the biggest courts in the sport. And the very first thing on her mind, before she even mentions tennis, is how many people are going to show up to watch her opponent. Stay with me for the next 15 minutes, because by the end of this, you are going to understand exactly why one 21-year-old is quietly rewriting the rules of fear in professional tennis, and why nobody in the locker room wants to say it out loud. If you've ever wondered what it actually feels like for a champion to admit, even for a second, that she's scared of something that isn't a forehand, this is that moment. Don't scroll. Don't skip ahead. Because the ending of this story is not what you think it is, and I promise you, you will want to see how this plays out. Before we go further, if this story is actually pulling you in right now, do me one favor. Hit subscribe before you get lost in the next 15 minutes. Not because I'm asking for a number. Because stories like this one, real athletes, real pressure, real human moments that never make the highlight reels, they disappear from your feed the second you close this tab. Subscribing means you don't miss the next one. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to a small channel trying to tell these stories properly. Okay. Let's get into it. Amanda Anisimova is not a rookie. She's 24 years old, a former US Open girls champion who beat her own countrywoman Coco Gauff in that final years ago. She dethroned Simona Halep to reach a French Open semi-final at just 17. She's made Wimbledon quarterfinals. She's a world number 10 heading into Cincinnati, one of the last big stops before the US Open. This is a woman who has faced pressure her entire career. So when a reporter asked her about her next opponent, round of 32 at the Cincinnati Open, everybody expected the usual answer. The scouting report. The tactical breakdown. Instead, this is what she said. No, I haven't played her before. She's been having such an incredible season. I know it's probably going to be a very packed stadium. Read that again. Not the serve. Not the movement. Not the backhand. The stadium. Now here's why that single sentence should stop you in your tracks. If you understand how professional athletes are trained to speak before a match, you know that almost nothing they say is truly unscripted. Every word is filtered through years of media coaching designed to project calm and control. So when a top-level player breaks that pattern, even slightly, even in one sentence about a crowd, it's worth asking what that sentence is really telling you. Because Anisimova didn't just make small talk about ticket sales. She gave one of the most honest, unintentional scouting reports of the entire season. And it wasn't about her opponent's game at all. It was about something much bigger, something that has almost nothing to do with tennis and everything to do with why the tour is starting to look at this one player completely differently. Let's talk about who that opponent actually is, because the size of this moment only makes sense once you know her story. Her name is Alex Eala. 21 years old, from the Philippines. She walked into Cincinnati as the 17th seed, her highest ever seeding at this level, sitting at a career-high world ranking of number 20. She got there off the back of winning her very first WTA Tour title, in Washington, just weeks earlier, where she beat the tournament's own top seed, Jessica Pegula, in the final. She's not some unknown wild card. Going into this Cincinnati meeting, Eala had already beaten 9 different top 10 opponents in her career, including Iga Swiatek, Coco Gauff, Madison Keys, and Alina Svitolina twice. She was walking into this match against Anisimova gunning for her 10th. And here's the detail that makes this whole story worth telling. Anisimova has years more experience at the very top of the sport than Eala does right now. She's the one with the Grand Slam final run, the one with the deeper resume. If anyone should be walking into this match thinking purely about tennis, it should be her. Instead, before a single ball was struck, the first thing she chose to talk about publicly was the size of the crowd she expected to walk into. Sit with that for a second. Then tell me in the comments, one word, packed, if you already sense where this is going, because I want to know how many of you clocked this before I even finished explaining it. Here's the layer almost nobody talks about, and it has nothing to do with noise levels. Think about what elite athletic preparation is actually built for. Sports psychologists, performance coaches, entire support systems exist for one reason: to make sure a player walks onto the court thinking about exactly one thing, the match in front of her. So when a top 10 player, with that exact kind of professional infrastructure around her, publicly names the crowd as something she's already bracing for, that's not really about decibels anymore. That's a competitor quietly admitting, whether she means to or not, that something outside of pure tennis is already occupying real mental space before she's even hit a ball. And that kind of acknowledgement usually gets reserved for one type of opponent. The kind whose presence changes the environment itself. Normally, that level of pre-match acknowledgement belongs to the very biggest names in a sport. Multi-slam champions. Athletes with a decade of build-up behind them. Alex Eala is 21. She has one career WTA title. She has never won a Grand Slam. By almost every traditional measuring stick, she is still, technically, an emerging player. And yet a world number 10 is talking about her the exact same way people talk about established superstars. That's the reframe. This was never really about crowd size. It's about what it means that a top 10 professional is now pre-planning her mindset around the atmosphere one specific opponent brings into the building. Here's an analogy that makes it click. Imagine a rookie in any major sport, not even 5 full seasons in, and opposing teams start building entire game plans around neutralizing that one rookie's crowd energy, the exact same way they'd prepare to face a franchise icon who's been filling arenas for 15 years. That gap between career achievements on paper and the actual weight a player carries in a room is enormous, and it almost never happens this early. That gap is exactly what Anisimova's quote just exposed. Now tell me honestly, if you were in Eala's shoes right now, knowing an opponent is already thinking about your crowd before she's thought about your game, what would you do with that? Use it as fuel, or try to shut it out completely? Drop your answer below, because I'm genuinely curious how people are reading this from outside the Philippines. And if you think this was just one isolated quote taken out of context, stay with me, because the body of evidence around this entire season says otherwise. Washington, early August. Eala walked in with modest public expectations and walked out as the champion, beating the tournament's own top seed, Jessica Pegula, in the final. Her first ever WTA Tour title. Weeks later, at Cincinnati, reports covering her run describe her Filipino following as having quote, transformed her recent matches into events of their own. That's not fan hype. That's how tennis journalists are now describing her matches. And going into this exact clash with Anisimova, she had already compiled 9 wins against top 10 opponents in a single stretch of her career, a number most players never reach in a decade on tour. Here's the number that ties all of it together. This Cincinnati match landed in the same week Eala was sitting at a fresh career-high ranking, one strong result away from climbing even further, right in the same tournament where a top 10 opponent was publicly admitting she was bracing herself for the atmosphere Eala brings with her. The story about her results and the story about her presence were not two separate things happening. They were happening in the exact same week, on the exact same run, building toward the exact same match. Put all of that together and Anisimova's quote stops sounding like small talk before a press conference. It starts sounding like the most honest scouting report a top 10 player gave all season. Not a report on a forehand. Not a report on a serve. A report on presence. On the fact that walking onto a court against Alex Eala now means walking into an environment that a seasoned veteran at the top of the sport feels she genuinely has to prepare for. So let's go back to where we started. Why would a Grand Slam finalist, with years of experience at the top of this game, choose to talk about a crowd before she talked about tennis? The answer isn't complicated anymore. She said it because it's true. Because Eala has become one of the rare players in the sport right now where the environment around her match matters just as much as the match itself. That doesn't happen to a typical 17th seed. It happens to players who are becoming something bigger than their ranking suggests. This is exactly where things stand heading into that court in Cincinnati. Eala one strong result away from another career high. A top 10 opponent who has already told the world, in her own words, exactly what she expects to walk into. None of that guarantees anything. Rankings, crowds, and quotes don't win tennis matches. Points do. But what this quote reveals goes beyond one single match. It tells you the tour itself, player by player, is quietly adjusting how it prepares to face her. Not just as a talented 21-year-old with a loyal following back home. As a competitor whose presence alone is now part of the equation every single opponent has to account for. Anisimova has already told you what she expects walking into that stadium. The only real question left is what happens once she's actually standing in it. Does she treat that crowd as fuel, the same way Eala herself used the atmosphere in Washington to help carry her to a first career title? Or does the weight of every match now carrying this much attention become the toughest test either of them has faced all season? We're about to find out. And whatever happens on that court is going to tell us more about where this rivalry is actually headed than any ranking update ever could. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't just a tennis story anymore. It's a story about the exact moment a player stops being an underdog and starts being someone every single opponent has to plan for. If that got you even a little bit invested, subscribe now, because we are going to be tracking exactly how this plays out, match by match, and I don't want you to miss the next chapter of this.